Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael, and today we're getting back into some more Reddit stories. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's begin. This first story was created 2 years ago in the Off My Chest subreddit by user own introduction 7923. The post is titled, "I just caught my GF in bed with my dad. I'm on mobile, so I apologize for the formatting. This is a throwaway for privacy reasons." So to start, I, male 22, have been with my soon-to-be ex-GF Kate, who is 21. We've been together for just shy of 3 years. Our relationship throughout the 3 years has been amazing. She had always been kind and supportive, open and honest with me. We had dates often, our lovemaking life was great, and we had very few arguments. But when we did get into a disagreement, we communicated and came to an understanding before long. I believed our relationship to be healthy and loving, but apparently I was wrong. About a week ago, I noticed that Kate was becoming very touchy about me being on or around her phone. This was odd to me because not only had she always let me use her phone to make calls if mine was flat or I didn't have immediate access to mine, she had also downloaded games for me to play on her phone to distract me when she wanted to watch her shows. Kate began snapping at me for asking to borrow her phone or snatching it out of my hand if I was so much as moving it away from the edge of the counter so it wouldn't fall. And whenever I questioned her behavior, she brushed it off and explained she was just in a bad mood. Her constant dismissal of my noticeable confusion began to annoy me, so I asked her if she was hiding anything from me, which led to an argument about her saying I was accusing her of infidelity and not trusting her. She tried to get physical with me, in which case I shut the argument down and told her to sleep in the guest bedroom. She was furious about it, but I told her we would talk about it in the morning. When we did talk about it, she apologized for her behavior and gave me her phone. I told her I trusted her and didn't need to go through it. And to be frank, I did trust her. I believed her outburst to be due to the ongoing stress at work, which was clearly stupid of me. The next day, I noticed she had gotten a missed call from my father. I had never known my father to like Kate or even have her contact information. In fact, I was convinced that they both disliked each other. At every family event, they would often argue or make snarky remarks at one another until we had to leave due to the tense atmosphere they had created. So I decided to ask Kate why my father had called her. She physically froze and mumbled an excuse about it being my birthday soon and he had planned something. But my father and I were never very close, so I didn't understand why he would do something like that. But I played it off and decided to go about my day. Then the following night, I texted her explaining that I had a late shift and would be back around 10 p.m. We ended up being dismissed early due to an incident regarding our manager and a few staff, so I was heading home by 7 p.m. and tried calling her, but she had her phone off, so I assumed it had gone flat or she had turned it off, which she does often at home. When I arrived home, I noticed my father's car 2 houses down from ours. I tried calling him, but his phone was also turned off, which I found odd because my mother likes his phone to be on so she can call him when she needs him. She's handicapped. I assumed my mother was with him, so I opened the door quietly to surprise her as I hadn't seen her in a while. I was met with the sight of my girlfriend bent over the kitchen counter with my father behind her. They both froze and started profusely yelling and telling me it wasn't what it looked like and that they could explain. I shut and locked the deadbolt door from the outside and went to a friend's house. Since then, they've both been blowing up my phone, apologizing, and begging me not to say anything to anyone. And quite frankly, I'm just disgusted. Disgusted with my father, who is turning 60 next month and has my mother to take care of. And disgusted with Kate, who was getting railed by my father for who knows how long. I honestly want to throw up and set them both on fire. I'm most worried about how my mother will take the situation as she's very dependent on my father and adores him. How should I go about this? I don't need closure or to confront them. I don't want to know how their gross relationship started or how long it's been going on. I just need advice on how to approach the situation without causing a bigger mess than there is. Any advice is welcome. Thank you for reading. TLDR, I caught my 60-year-old father banging my GF on my kitchen counter, and I don't know how to handle the situation without blowing it up. Absolutely insane. The audacity of OP's dad and GF begging him not to tell anyone is hilarious. I know OP doesn't want to blow this situation up, but I don't think you are able to not blow up something like this. If his dad is scummy enough to sleep with his GF, then he's scummy enough to go to his wife and fabricate a lie. I genuinely think that the best course of action here is for OP to expose them himself. then he can proceed with separating from his GF if he decides to. I want to say that the weirdest part is going to be his interaction with his dad, but OP already said he wasn't that close to him, which probably also explains why the dad even did something like this. He doesn't respect his son at all. Unfortunately, OP is not the only one that's going to be hurt by this. In fact, OP's mom might take this even harder than OP himself. One user named Higaroth made a comment under the post that I pretty much agree on. Your father will have already told your mother something, I assume. Like a lie prepared to get her not to believe you. Have your girlfriend pack her bags. She can stay anywhere else. If she's refusing to leave, stay with a mate for now. Your mom is harder. She's in a more vulnerable position. Ultimately, it's up to her whether she wants to stay or leave. But let her know that she can stay with you or that you'll help her move her stuff out if she has another person's house where she can stay. I assume you're in a one-bedroom apartment. I don't know her personality, but given her disability and the length of their marriage, she may feel more inclined to stay. It is best not to pressure her to leave. You two need to support each other. Please let her know that she isn't less than, she doesn't deserve this, and that he had no right to do that to her. Just like your GF had no right to do this to you. Both of you deserved better than this. I'm sorry this happened. I'm worried your father will argue that this was a way for him to decompress. He might try to guilt your disabled mother into finding his actions excusable. But there's no excuse for cheating, especially with your son's girlfriend. An update post was created about 2 weeks later. My mother and I took a few days to get through all the messages and phone calls. We blocked my maternal grandparents as well as my father. I contacted my landlord and real estate agent and informed them briefly of the situation. I told them I was no longer living on the premises and that I would like to have my name taken off the lease. Luckily, our lease was being renewed in that coming week. The next day, they contacted Kate to inform her that I had taken my name off the lease for the following month, and in the next week, if she could not take on my portion of the rent, she would have 3 months to vacate the property. I don't know how she reacted, but I could tell it wasn't overly ecstatic. Her parents contacted me and asked if, despite everything, I would be willing to pay for her rent. They said it would be just for this month because she doesn't have the money for it at the moment. Obviously, I declined and told them that I no longer have anything to do with her. They then informed me she was pregnant with my child and needed assistance from the father of her baby, and this would be a last goodbye. I laughed and told them I most definitely wasn't the father of that baby if she was pregnant, and if she needed assistance, she could contact my father. Then I hung up and blocked them. On a brighter note, my mother and I have just put a down payment on a house together. Right now, we are looking into hiring a caregiver to help my mother when I have work or trips out of state. My father has attempted to call both of us from multiple phone numbers and had numerous family members try to persuade my mother to meet up with him to chat. As a result, my mother and I have gotten a new phone number to avoid his mess. I also heard from a mate that Kate is trying to hire a lawyer so she can get child support money from me. But apparently, because she has no proof I'm the father and refuses to take a DNA test of the baby, she hasn't had any luck. Edit 1. I forgot to mention it above as I didn't see it as necessary when writing this, but Kate is apparently 5 weeks pregnant. We haven't been intimate for just under 2 months, so the baby is unlikely to be mine. If it is, I will pay child support, but I want proof before I give her money for a baby that may or may not be mine. Edit 2. To clarify, Kate and I weren't having issues when we weren't intimate. I was too tired to initiate due to work commitments, and at the time I assumed she was as well, but it's likely her needs were met by either my father or other parties. Edit 3. Something else I forgot to mention. Yes, I did get a test for infections I may not be aware of, and all tests came back negative, so I'm clear in that sense. After that update, OP disappeared for about 8 months before giving us a final update. The update said, "Hi all, I apologize for taking so long to update. A lot has happened over the past year or so, but to cut a long story short, my mother has her own house now that I pay for. She no longer has contact with my father and has officially divorced him, and she has a full-time career now. As for Kate, she was in fact pregnant, but fortunately it wasn't mine or my father's for that matter. Unfortunately, she lost the baby in her second trimester and, of course, blamed me for the stress I put on her. I no longer have contact with her either. My father has been cut off from his family and friends and fired from his place of work. Apparently, he wasn't just my ex, but had a previous affair with one of his colleagues' partners and had explicit pictures of his eldest brother's youngest daughter. The brother was 40 and the daughter was 20. A big thank you to everyone who messaged and commented. You guys were a huge support. I apologize for not getting around to messaging all of you back. Everything you've all said, whether checking in on my mother and me or offering kind words, was deeply appreciated. My mother also wanted to thank you for all your kind words and well wishes and give you all a big virtual hug. I'm not sure if this was too vague an update, but if you need more context, I'll edit the post or try to answer as many questions as I can in the comments. Edit, I could have just edited the part in the post, but I meant to say youngest brother, not eldest. Fortunately, this story actually had a happy ending. Those that deserved to be screwed got screwed in the end, and both OP and his mom are in a great position now. I didn't really expect OP's dad to have been having another affair, but then again, I'm also not really too surprised by it either. The guy is just a total degenerate, and to make matters worse, he's 60 years old. What the is he thinking? OP said that he wouldn't have mind paying for child support if Kate really was carrying his kid, but I'm really glad that wasn't the case. This might be cruel of me, but I low-key wanted the kid to belong to OP's dad. That way he can be even more screwed. No way a relationship between OP's GF and his dad would have worked. It would have just created a lot more stress and drama between those two, which they both deserve, to be honest. One user in this final update, named AvailableAffect241, commented this: "Glad to hear it, man. Keep looking after yourself and your mother. You both need it. What did Kate say to you outside of blaming you for the miscarriage? Did she say sorry for the baby not being yours? What has your father said to you since then?" OP replied, "She didn't plan on telling me or my father that the baby wasn't related to either of us. Her mother reached out to me to inform me of the situation and that Kate had planned on telling me that the baby was mine to demand child support. She did reach out the next day to try and tell me the baby was mine with some poorly forged email, to which I told her her mother had already told me that it wasn't mine or my father's, and she cracked it, to which I blocked her number. I'm not sure if her mother faced any backlash for that. Then, after 2 to 3 months or so, she messaged me on her mother's number a fat long paragraph about how she lost the baby and how it was all my fault for stressing her out and not stepping up and being a decent human being. I haven't heard much from my father. My mother, on the other hand, has heard a lot about him from relatives and a few wives of his colleagues with whom she's still friends. They check in on her because of her health. The last message he sent was some BS about how it wasn't his fault, Kate seduced him, blah blah blah. He's blocked as well, and as far as I know, his life is screwed. This next story we're looking at was created in October of 2021 in the Am I the AH subreddit. The post was made by user PrankThrowaway5780, and it's titled AITA for yelling at and ignoring my GF over a prank. I'm a 22-year-old male and have been with my GF Nicole, who is 25, for a couple of years now. She's always liked survival stuff and weaponry and all that. I absolutely don't. I've had really bad experiences with knives when I was younger, and Nicole knows about them. We both love Halloween and usually throw a party, dress up, and goof around. We cook pumpkin seeds and watch movies. Anyway, the point is, Nicole loves doing tricks with her knives, like a 5-finger fillet, flicking it open and closed, twirling it, etc. She'll do it when we're watching a show or movie together, forgetting that I've asked her please not to, or she'll buy a new one and show it off, asking if I want to give it the first bite. Then she'll pout when I say no. 2 days ago, she was playing with it again, and I asked her why she kept forgetting. She said, "Wow, okay, don't insult my intelligence again," and that it was just a knife and therefore not a big deal, so it is not that important to remember. After that, she put away the knife and we continued to have an okay night, but I was on edge and jumpy whenever she touched me. Yesterday, she called me into the kitchen, I entered, and she was playing 5-finger fillet. She said I startled her and she messed up. Badly. I lost my cool. I screamed my head off and tried shouting what I knew about first aid at her. In complete panic, I raced to grab my phone, dialing an ambulance, only for her to start laughing. She showed me it was a prank involving red food dye and a carrot. She laughed about how I would have known it was a joke if I wasn't so squeamish about knives, that it's proof I need to get more comfortable, that anyone with passing knowledge knows that it doesn't look like that when something like that happens. She kept explaining how she did it, how she practiced, and how she could show me, but I didn't even answer her. It was like my head was underwater and my heart was beating out of my chest. I just moved on autopilot, grabbed my keys, and drove a few blocks away before pulling over to breathe. Nicole tried to call me, and the first thing I said was it wasn't funny at all, and she asked, "Are you crying?" Then I hung up on her. She kept texting me saying she was sorry, that she didn't think I'd react so badly to a joke, that it was just meant to be good fun in the Halloween spirit. I ignored her. I texted her later saying I was home but ignored everything else. This morning, she sent the picture of the props to the group chat with a few of our mutual friends, and they chimed in saying, "It doesn't even look real. I've muted the chat since, and I wonder if I have a leg to stand on before I go back and apologize." Edit. It's overwhelming how much response this got, and I tried to read all of your comments. Some of them made me laugh, some warmed my heart, and others had very hard truths that I still needed to hear, no matter how raw they left me. There are a lot of repeating questions and assumptions. First, we don't live together. At this point, I don't think we ever will. Second, I stayed primarily because the good seemed to outweigh the bad. You remember the negatives more than the positives, so obviously I just had to remember her positive qualities instead of being swayed by my focus on the bad times. Plus, it was always almost perfect after we had a fight, and I just assumed the boom and bust cycle was normal. I didn't know Nicole liked knives at first. A mutual friend, who I will call Crystal, introduced us as I was new to the area. And at first, Nicole and I hit it off as we had a lot of shared interests. Music, art, outdoor activities, antiquing, wine, food, and cooking, a lot of things. We started dating and eventually went on a camping and hiking trip where she used a knife to split some kindling and pointed it toward herself. I remember telling her to watch out, and she said I needed to relax because she did it all the time. She asked me if I wanted to do it myself, and I admitted I didn't like knives. Later in the trip, we drank by the fire and talked, and that's when I told her about my trauma. She promised to protect me, and I remember that exactly because I had the mental image of her fending off a mugger. I joked that she was my hero. My trauma has been brought up after that point, and neither of us were drunk at the time. My knife issues typically don't impact my daily life except to make me more apt to be very slow in the kitchen when chopping things. It doesn't seem like abuse, especially when we're good. When it's bad, it's really rough. I don't have any other baseline as I was a late bloomer dating-wise. My dad always said that both people should give 110% in a relationship, but everyone argues. I thought working through the rough patches was normal. That's also why I was preparing to apologize, because it takes two in an argument. So I'm responsible as well and need to apologize for my part. In this case, ruining the night with my reaction. I did go through therapy to help cope with the initial incident surrounding my aversion to knives. I was a lot worse when it happened, to the extent that I couldn't have anyone point the knife in the direction of another living being, or certain songs on the radio that were playing at the time, or certain smells. I've made progress, but clearly not enough to stay with her and deal with her fidgeting with the knives. I will admit to backsliding a bit. I seem a lot more anxious when I stay the night and can't stay asleep or have more nightmares, which is why I believed her when she said I was overreacting. Also, concerning the fidgeting, it's not a constant thing. Sometimes she'd go weeks without pulling the knife out. Sometimes she'd complain that I only focus on the fact she had used the knife versus how long she had abstained, which seems reasonable to point out. So the obvious issue here that I'm sure most of you are thinking is, why is OP even in this relationship? Overall, I think that OP's GF is the one in the wrong here, but OP is also not doing himself any favors by staying with someone who triggers his past trauma. I find it incredibly immature for someone at the age of 25 to be teasing their partner about their fears. OP stated that he had set up boundaries with what he was comfortable with, but his GF completely ignores him. Not only that, she also laughs at him for fearing knives. The woman is just a jerk. Then, as if all of that were not enough, she also gets her friends to gang up on OP as well. Just sounds like a pair of people that shouldn't be together. One user named Passepartout made the following comment under the post. Yeah, the quote-unquote forgetting about his triggers is 100% intentional. She's manipulating him into thinking he's the one who's always at fault, that he should get over it and learn to react the right way. Her ignoring his wishes and casually causing anxiety in him for shits and giggles, as opposed to getting upset at his boundaries, wishes, and triggers not being respected like any normal person would. The logical manipulation argument chains supposedly proving why he's wrong with his emotions and needs and whatever, and her insulting, intentionally hurtful shit is supposedly therefore right. Yikes. Like twisting his "I've asked you repeatedly not to do X because it gives me anxiety. Why do you keep doing it?" into somehow insulting her, which is an important question to ask and something she should apologize for. She's gaslighting him. His needs are being intentionally trampled. And she's being a callous and cruel partner, and especially trying to recruit the friends into her corner now that shit is hitting the fan. Sorry, it's just a prank. Why are you this sensitive and overreacting to some good fun in the Halloween spirit? These are all massive red flags. She's emotionally abusive. This goes beyond just being a bit insensitive or incompatible. These are active abuser and manipulation tactics. OP, every single domestic abuser also has wonderful sides to them. That's why the victims first get with them and later stay. The bad stuff is sprinkled in between the amazing. It's like a frog in the water that's slowly being brought to a boil. It starts nice and you don't notice how bad it's getting because your perspective of what's normal and acceptable is being warped by the constant gaslighting and manipulation. Being told all day every day that your emotional reactions are irrational and wrong and their mistreatment of you is actually just normal harmless fun is so wrong. Like the bit in where OP thinks he might be the AH where he's all, I know it's all my fault that there's a conflict and it's solely my problem. I should learn to get over it. This is just what she's like. I'm the only one who should adapt. Our problems don't happen because she refuses to consider my feelings and actively triggers me for fun. No, the problems exist solely because I'm too sensitive and I have to try harder not to feel uncomfortable when my wishes and boundaries are trampled on, because then we wouldn't have any problems is just disturbing. Get out now, OP. Don't apologize, end the relationship. You are not the AH 1,000 times. Save yourself. The very next day, OP came back with an update. I have no idea how to go about this, but I don't think this would be appropriate to post in the AITA subreddit per their rules. Plus, it's really long, so here's an update of sorts to my first post. A lot of the conversation is paraphrased with quotes that stuck in my mind. I also kept adding to this as things developed, and I'm running on 0 sleep, so I'm sorry if it's unclear. I reached out to Nicole again yesterday to talk, and I went to stand my ground and explain things so she could understand my side. She greeted me with thanks for gracing me with your presence and asked if I was here to act my age and talk like an adult. She slammed the door behind me and pointed to the couch so we could discuss things. Nicole started by saying my reaction was unreasonable and completely out of line considering the situation. I said that things needed to change because that prank wasn't okay at all, and that she knows I have issues with knife violence. I asked what was funny about the prank. She interrupted and said that ultimatums aren't part of any relationship. So I said, I don't think this is working out for us. I don't think we're happy together. Nicole froze at first. I started to explain that the knife thing and our respective stances being so different is not fair to either of us, but she repeatedly asked, so you're going to break up nearly 3 years just because of this? I tried to tell her it was more than just this. It was everything else. It was that she kept forgetting my boundaries and triggering me, that she loves playing with knives but it upsets me. Then she started talking over me and yelling that apparently I think she's an idiot and that I'm the best actor in the world. She claimed that she never knew I felt so horrible and that maybe I should call the cops on her for abuse. She grabbed her cell phone and offered it to me again and again, saying, go on, call. But when I said we just need to talk, she interrupted with, no you won't, because I know, we both know, no cop is going to arrest me for a joke. Also, I'm not very tall, but she was standing right in front of me while I was seated, so I couldn't get up without moving her. After throwing her phone on the couch next to me, she stormed into the kitchen, shouting that she should get rid of all her knives because I was so terrified. She threw a few into the sink and then the whole block of knives into the trash, the whole time asking, what about this one? Is it too sharp and scary for you? When I flinched at the noises, she said, oh, do you feel threatened? How do you think I feel when I have to defend myself against your feelings? Nicole told me to quit crying and that I couldn't just use tears to manipulate her. She mocked me when I said, please stop. She said she has to walk on eggshells because she has to deal with a boyfriend who can't handle a single joke without running off into the night. She said, it's not hard to not overreact. Literally just think before you go crazy, it's that simple. And that it's ridiculous that a grown man can't handle a knife or a gun. She said I refuse to let go of my victimhood because anyone normal would have gotten over it by now. It's been nearly 9 years. She called me stubborn and childish for picking this hill to die on, that I'm not innocent, and that it's not fair that I'm allowed to ignore her for hours, but she can't have a little fun. Then she asked if my ego was really that big. It's sickening that I don't trust her or think she's smart or skilled enough to handle a knife properly, and that it's sexist, infantilizing, and insulting. At some point, I said I needed to go home, and it was like a switch, and she said, please stop crying, I hate when you cry. Then she jokingly said, I guess hibachi dates are off the table. Or at least I think it was a joke because she laughed. Then she said, "I should probably take the knives out of the trash now, shouldn't I?" She apologized and said that she'd put in more effort since it meant so much to me. She admitted that I'm such a sensitive guy that if she stopped doing everything that made me uncomfortable, she wouldn't be able to do anything. She pointed out that I cried while watching a movie the other day, which is proof that I'm overly emotional, and it made sense that she thought I was my normal self. But she was sorry for not realizing sooner. It was really upsetting me. She promised she would do her best not to bring the knives out when I'm around. Nicole hugged me and told me to let go. We can get through this. There's nothing we can't get over, and asked for a chance to start over. It's stupid, but I just said yes. I wanted to go home, get out of her house, and leave while she was still acting nice. I now realize I didn't hold my ground. I feel like an idiot and a coward. I got home and puked and couldn't get to sleep again. Today, Nicole came and dropped off lunch and coffee for me, gave me a kiss, and said she loved me. All the old ladies in the office were gushing about how cute we were together. I'm going to reach out to one of the guys I'm closer to and the friend who set us up to find out when Nicole got so into knives. Because I remember about 7 to 8 months in, it was shortly after the camping trip. It was Nicole's birthday and she asked for a specific knife as her present. So at least then, but I can't really remember there being anything major before then. I'm going to break up officially with her tomorrow with one of the guys if possible. That way I can get my stuff from her place. A now deleted user said this under the update post. "Holy shit. She is 100% abusive. You need to stay away from her. She zeroed in on your trauma and has been using it to exert some sick power over you. Everything she said was completely unreasonable, and she's gaslighting you by making you the problem, not her. Then, the moment you resisted, she switched tactics and started to love bomb you. The lunch and coffee were part of that love bombing. Do not be around her alone. Ever. She sounds potentially sociopathic, and pay attention to this. You are not a coward in any way. You are a trauma victim. How you react is typical of someone who has been through a trauma, and she's taking full advantage of it. Her standing over you, her words, her tone, and her volume are all done to overwhelm you. She knew how to trigger your trauma response, and she did it all. She is a danger to you. Take care of yourself." OP didn't touch his account for about 3 years after making that update post, but about 2 to 3 weeks from the time of this recording, he came back with more information. There's previous information in my profile concerning a post I made on AITA a few years ago. I came to Reddit about my girlfriend and her knife prank. It's been a long while since, and I was uncertain if I could update here or there or wherever. Roll this back over a decade ago for more background. When I was a preteen, we experienced a home invasion that resulted in my mother and dog dying and left me with a lifelong phobia of knives and anxiety surrounding blood and break-ins. Directly following the break-in, I was unable to handle a knife being pointed at another living creature. My brain caught on to stupid things and connected them to the events and made them into triggers. Mom's perfume, the sound of glass shattering, or a door banging open. Even now, I still hate the song that was playing at the time, but at least it doesn't trigger a flashback anymore. Blood on the beige carpet featured prominently in my nightmares. I worked extensively with a therapist to process what happened and what I'd seen. Recovery took years of therapy, weeks of inpatient care, and medication to help with the nightmares, PTSD, depression, and anxiety. We sold the house as soon as we could. I moved out of state as soon as I could. I kept up with therapy and continued to take my medication. My aversion to knives became something minor in how it impacted my life. I was careful in the kitchen, and my fear was under control in my normal daily life. I didn't go out of my way to interact with knives. It helped that everything seemed to be coming together. I made new friends, I was balancing work and school, and I just met the girl who'd become my first long-term adult girlfriend. I know it was just the honeymoon phase, but it felt like we were progressing well even after the infatuation wore off. We stood together through highs and lows and the mediocre middle ground where there was nothing exciting, just the mundane. I thought that was the marker of a steady relationship, to be able to stick together even after the excitement of a new relationship has faded. We went on a few trips together, driving across state lines to meet her family or flying back to see my dad. On one of our trips, we went camping and my fear of knives was brought up. That led to the break-in being brought up. She seemed to care at the time, even promising to protect me if something ever happened and offering to help install a camera in my apartment. After the camping trip, I don't know if it was always there and I noticed it more afterward or what, but she started to be more obviously into knives. practicing tricks in front of me, showing videos to me, and starting a collection. She even asked for a knife for her birthday that year, showing me exactly which one she wanted. Before, she was into camping, into guns, and how to forage, make shelter, purify water, basic survival stuff, and artillery and tanks. She did multiple courses about military history in college and busted out the textbook sometimes if she remembered something she thought I would find interesting. But suddenly, it seemed like her focus was on carving and skinning animals. She was fixated on knife wounds and tricks and collecting and displaying knives. She started doing the tricks more often in front of me, even when sitting next to me on the couch or at the dinner table. She would gesture with the knife without thinking and even point it at me. Again, one of my major triggers is knives pointed at people or animals. She started sending me videos of news clips of other break-ins, or news reports of robberies ending in murder. This was all in between a bunch of other funny videos or pictures, so checking Snapchat became a game of Russian roulette. If I didn't check the links sent through text, she'd keep sending them and ask what I thought. She'd forget she had the knife in hand when she came up to me, sometimes from behind. My nightmares came back. My anxiety got worse. No matter how often I reminded her to please stop playing with the knife in front of me, or at least not next to me, she would always forget after a little bit. Some part of me refuses to believe there's no way she risked bodily harm just to unnerve me. It came to a head when she pulled a prank where she pretended to cut off a finger. We had a huge fight, our biggest one yet. I wish I'd acted differently and hadn't stormed out, but I did. In hindsight, there would be a lot of things I'd change about the time I spent with Nicole. I was so sure I'd just break up with her for good. I don't know why I didn't stay broken up with her. When I did at first, I did it alone because my friend Jack rolled his eyes and called me a coward for wanting to make up. So I did it in a coffee shop instead, hoping the public eye could be my backup. Nicole stared at me with this affronted expression. At that moment, it was as if I couldn't find the words anymore. Her eyes were huge and wide and hateful. Like, I've never seen anyone glare at me like that. She gripped the cup like she would throw it at me. I had it in my head to bolt the second she moved because I could see it so clearly. But then she started crying loudly and kept asking why I would do this to her. She said she hoped I found happiness with someone better since she clearly wasn't enough for me, despite doing everything to be a good girlfriend. I felt like shit and people were staring, so I wished her well and asked if she wanted me to call a friend. But she told me to leave her the alone, so I did. I hate how I handled the breakup, but it felt like autopilot in the moment. In short order, I lost the support of our mutual friends who had become my only friends during my relationship with Nicole, which I understand as they have known her for much longer. Jack actually confronted me and called me a piece of shit for embarrassing her like that in public. He called me trash for leaving her sobbing alone and not even offering her a ride home. He wouldn't listen to my explanations and said I could excuse myself, but everyone now knew what kind of guy I really am. People at work mentioned how sad it was that we broke up. I didn't feel like it was the place to explain my reasoning, and after the confrontation with Jack, I didn't feel like I had a right to. I felt like crap, like a person, and I felt numb. I tried to move on to find a new normal. After about a month of us being broken up, she called me and begged for me to come over to help her. She was scared she'd hurt herself. I went to her immediately. I held her all night and helped her wash her hair after days of not being able to bring herself to. She admitted she'd done a horrible thing and that she couldn't stand how she treated me, that she wished she could go back and change so we could still be together. I didn't know how to address that, so I just stayed with her the whole night. And the next day at work, she came by to drop off a homemade lunch and to thank me for being there for her. I stupidly let myself get sucked back in. I get that it's my fault. Coffee in the morning became dinner and drinks out became movie nights. We went to shows and flea markets together because we still had similar interests. One time, she even noticed a booth with knives and directed us away. And while yes, it wasn't necessary as I could see a knife display and not be freaked out, it was a nice gesture. In the past, she would have gone there and either bought one herself or asked me to buy it for her. This was one of multiple changes that made me think maybe she was truly making an effort, that at the least, maybe we could be friends again. I started to get invited back into the group somewhat. 2 months later, she kissed me. We were both drunk and it didn't go any further. I didn't talk to her about it because I thought she didn't remember, but then she approached me to ask if there was any salvaging us. If she'd proven that she was different now, better even. I thought maybe. I stayed because she really had been so sweet. It was like starting over and we got back together. I was permitted back into the friend group in full, but Jack kept ignoring me, and Crystal was no longer there. And while it was awkward at first, soon enough we were acting like we'd never stop being friends for even a minute. It felt so good to go back to normal. It was like a weight off my chest and I could breathe again. It was nice for a while. She was so careful about the knife thing, and it did feel so normal and steady. Sure, we had small fights, but we always made up shortly after, and she'd be overwhelmingly loving after the fact. It felt like it was before, so it felt normal. I can't pinpoint when it started to creep back, but maybe it was when she started watching documentaries on her phone with the sound up high while sitting next to me. Or when she'd poke or grab me while I was cutting up dinner, then laugh at my startled response. Or she'd scoff if I teared up watching or reading something, then tell me later that it was out of fondness, not exasperation. She would say I really needed to stop reading so much into it. Or she'd yell at me for forgetting something that she never even told me about. And then the next day, she'd get frustrated that I didn't insist properly, that she was mistaken. Like it was all small things that on their own weren't even that big of a deal. I didn't feel like I could speak up about it, or else I was nitpicking her. In hindsight, I was making excuses and clinging to when she was nice to me, trying to do anything to make sure we stayed happy and without bumps. Part of it was that I knew now that I'd be alone, that no one would understand why I'd throw away a good relationship, and that being with her was the best thing that could ever happen to me. We moved in together 4 months after we got back together. She was hinting around that it was the only way to prove to her that I'd forgiven her, that this was the only way we could move on and be happy. She insisted I move into her place because it was easier to move an apartment into a house than the other way around. It constantly felt like she was dangling that night when she was over me, like one wrong move from me and maybe the next time she wouldn't call for help. When we had fights, she paced through the house flicking a knife, looping from the bedroom to the living room to the office. She also said every single argument was really due to the fact I was holding a grudge over the prank and that we wouldn't be arguing if I just grew up and stopped taking out my trauma on her. She'd tell me not to piss her off because it would be too easy for her to make a mistake, and no one would think twice about what happened. A few times she'd gone on a rampage and overturned tables and threw glasses into the sink and dishwasher and said we were done for good, only for the next day to blow up my phone, begging me to talk this out, or have her friends encourage me to swallow my pride and go back to her because she's miserable without me. They would say that she was trying so hard, or she'd just wake me with a kiss after making me sleep on the couch as if the night before never happened. If I asked about the night before, the fight would start all over. Yet this time it'd be my fault because she was trying to move on, but I was holding a grudge. The following 10 months or so was the most terrifying, anxiety-riddled period of my life, and I only had myself to blame. Coming home from work, I puked my guts out more than a few times on the way just because I didn't want to go back to her. I felt trapped. She threw away the blanket my mother had knitted me for my crib because it was dirty. It wasn't dirty, it was a knit blanket that had been repaired repeatedly and hand washed frequently, so she'd accidentally put it through the wash and destroyed it. Then she bought a completely different throw blanket as a replacement and got mad when I didn't consider the matter resolved. She pulled another prank, this time with a fake positive pregnancy test. She scolded me for not being overjoyed because I immediately started panicking about the cost, bringing up a child in our dysfunction, and handling the stress rather than being excited. I feel like she wanted me to be happy so that she could crush my joy, but when I didn't react the way she wanted, she got angry. That night, she threatened me with the knife, pointing it at me and saying she should just snip me right then since I didn't want to have kids with her. Then she held me as I sobbed because I went into a panic. I didn't want her touching me, but I didn't know what else to do but let her touch me and apologize to her. Another time, she put the knife to her own throat during a fight and said I clearly wanted her to kill herself and didn't stop until I screamed at her, begging her to stop. Sometimes when driving, she'd start speeding and swerving or closing her eyes while on the highway and saying my fear meant I didn't trust her. Nicole just kept getting worse by the day. I remember waking up one morning with a moment of clarity. I knew she'd eventually kill me. I was sleeping next to my murderer. It still wasn't enough to push me away. Escaping her orbit seemed like too much, way more than I could handle. Everything I had in me was focused on just surviving day to day. I never knew if she'd break up with me on a whim or pick a fight, or be constantly pushing me closer to a panic attack all night, or if she'd flip and be sweet and caring. I felt like every day was Russian roulette hour to hour. Every word I said or action I did or didn't do was a chance to start a raging fight. She'd tossed out my antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication one night, and then during the resulting argument, she made a big show of forgiving me for raising my voice. I shouldn't have done that. I have no excuse. For weeks after, because I said I wanted to break up during the argument, she would ask if I was going to try to run away every time something went wrong. Is the takeout order wrong? Did I spill a cup of water? Is the streaming service not working immediately? Oh, don't get your panties in a twist and run off. And do I have to worry about you leaving me over this mistake too? Eventually, that tapered off, but maybe once a month during a fight, she would tearfully go to our friends and ask them to mediate. Then, during the meetings, say that I kept threatening to leave her again over nothing and how scared she was of losing me when she didn't know what set me off. More than a few times, she showed me texts from them where her friends were saying how she deserved better and didn't need to put up with me, but she'd tell me I don't listen to them because I love you anyway. She'd slap me and push me during arguments. I could never do anything right because even doing what she wanted without argument or not looking her in the eye could be enough to send her off the rails. Sometimes, as a joke, just in general, one of our friends would pull out a little pack of tissues and hand it over to me in case I'd run out, or make a production of hiding the butter knife at dinner under the napkin. It was humiliating, but if I spoke up, suddenly I was oversensitive and embarrassment, no fun. I had to learn how to deal with adult friendships and jokes, and they'd ask her how she could stand it. As a result, I didn't spend much time with them either. Usually, Nicole would go out with them and I'd stay home, which was the most relaxing I've ever felt during that time. Except for when she started randomly coming home without any notice or timeline. Like saying she'd be home at 6 but then not coming back until midnight or early morning. Or saying she'd be gone until 10 and coming back early at 2 or 3. Or randomly calling the house phone to make sure I was home and then getting angry if she even thought I sounded breathless, accusing me of having left. She started hinting that marriage would be the logical next step, and I was insulting her for not having proposed yet. Then she bought an engagement ring with my credit card and started showing off to all her friends how perfect my choice was. I didn't want to marry her. I felt bad for not wanting to marry her. I wanted us to be happy, and maybe giving her the wedding she wanted would help. In all those months, I never went to sleep feeling safe. I lay awake in bed, hyper aware of how close she was. I would try to go over in my head if I had behaved well enough to keep her happy and what I could do to prevent another explosion. In hindsight, it's sickening how long I let this go on. At the moment, it was just about all I could think of doing. I often woke up with nightmares which would in turn piss her off and set her off in a mood for the next day. But if I suggested sleeping separately, she would rage about how I was calling her a girlfriend. I started to keep a notebook at work and just writing shit down. Things she'd done or said, incidents, and what I'd done to set her off. It helped me feel more sane and also more like a moron because I could read back on times she actually hurt me and I still hadn't left. Every time I thought about leaving, I felt sick inside. I'd lose every social contact I had. I would have to find a new place to live. I'd have to bar her from my workplace, but they can't do anything without a restraining order, and that itself felt like a hurdle too. I dropped all my old friends in favor of her and felt like they'd refuse to even talk to me again. I was the idiot who let her back into my life and rekindled the relationship despite overwhelming feedback. I was stupid enough to deserve every bit of what was happening and too dumb to deserve to escape after wasting my previous chances. I hated myself and had frequent fantasies of just ending it all. The worst part wasn't the anxiety and terror though, it was when she was sweet and caring. For example, she always went all out for my birthday, anniversaries, or Christmas with thoughtful gifts. Except for the year when she kicked me out for the evening after throwing some decorations at the wall because they stopped working, for which she blamed me because I put them up. She was sweet and gentle one day or even for a week or two, only to slowly start ramping up the tension until she exploded yet again. She had an uncanny ability to blame me in ways that made me feel responsible for her emotions and for forcing her to react violently. When we drove out to visit my dad for Easter, things started to change. Dad was concerned about how quiet I'd become and that I hadn't come for Thanksgiving or Christmas or even called on New Year's Eve like I used to, that I looked tired, unhappy, and thin. Nicole was on her best behavior the whole time, leaving her knives in the car and trying to get everyone to focus on the engagement ring. But Dad still saw something was wrong. For 3 weeks after, he kept trying to contact me, but she wouldn't let me talk without her in the room. She checked my phone anytime she left me alone and checked the records online to see if I had deleted any calls. Eventually, I managed to get a burner phone and hid it at work, which allowed me to talk to my dad freely. He flew over with my uncle and they helped me gather my stuff from her house. When Nicole started sobbing and begging me to stay, my uncle kept her from the kitchen knives and had his phone ready to call the police if she tried to hurt herself or us. When Nicole started to insist I was taking her stuff too, I just let it go. She got to keep a few sentimental items of mine and the loss hurts still, but the most important ones I could take. Like, I was able to get all my documentation and cards out of her house. I didn't even bother with the ring. It was just money and she was already acting up. Uncle drove my car home while Dad had me fly with him. I'm ashamed to admit that the months directly following the breakup were almost worse than the time I spent with her, because I was out of survival mode and couldn't force myself to function the way I used to. I felt like a parasite on my father, unable to get my shit together, falling apart over nothing, being so volatile it frightened me. I'm in therapy again. Sometimes I feel better, like I can see a way forward, but then I feel like I'm back in the thick of it, and I'll never go back to normal and I'm permanently broken. Worse, every time I cry or get triggered or have a flashback, I can still hear her voice in my head calling me over emotional and too sensitive. I'd think to myself that I'd be fine by now if I just got over myself, that what I went through wasn't that bad. She sent mail to my dad's house for a while, threatening letters and pleas for me to see reason and stop overreacting. There were also pictures of us that were sentimental guilt trips. At first, I couldn't get a restraining order right away against her because I moved. Something about the jurisdictions and courts, but when she sent those letters, it helped at least ensure she couldn't continue contacting me. I found my old laptop a while ago, which had the password pre-populated. It wouldn't leave my mind, especially when I read what people were saying. Right now, I'm just rambling to get my head straight, but my messages from you guys were full of people saying how the must be amazing, how guys are willing to do stupid things when they want to stick their dick in something, that I don't have balls or a backbone clearly and I need to man up. Basically, everything I told myself in the past to remind myself of what I did to deserve to be stuck with her. I don't know if I can muster the courage to address any responses to them, but I really just want to tie up this loose end in my life so maybe I can stop rehashing it mentally and finally move on. I might also give my therapist the notebook I kept of Nicole's abuse, but I haven't wanted to even look for it. There's still a box of shit that I haven't opened up because it's all fucked with my head so much. What I wish I knew at the start of all this shit was that any amount of genuine discomfort isn't an acceptable price in a relationship, and you're allowed to stop giving them more chances even if they're trying and seem sorry. You're not obligated to help people change even if you love them, even if they do slightly better. So there is a lot of information to digest. There's no need to victim blame. OP understands that it was his own fault for stepping back into that relationship. I don't think OP went into detail about why he had trauma in the first 2 posts. So when I heard that part about his mom dying, it made me even more infuriated that his GF was doing all of this stuff to him. To make it worse, his GF knew all the details about why OP had the trauma. I thought at first maybe she didn't know all of the details. And it wasn't until going through this final update was I convinced that this woman was a full-on psychopath. OP had a moment where he said he felt guilty that he had to involve his father and uncle. He definitely should not feel that way. I'm sure 10 out of 10 times, his father would always be by his side to help him in his times of need. Just as OP said, no matter what he did on the surface, his dad knew that something wasn't right. That just goes to highlight how much he cared. Those are the relationships we need to nurture, not these toxic ties that will completely f up our lives like with OP's GF. That woman needs therapy. In fact, she might need to be locked up. If OP didn't finally get out of that relationship, it would have gotten so much worse. After marriage, the next step would be to introduce kids into the family. Can you imagine how much of a mess OP's life would be if he had children?